if you just, look at the apps on your phone right now, you probably expect them to update.
Yeah, constantly.
Right, you want the bug fixes, the new features, that constant invisible
A
management.
whole team of developers just making sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes.
Exactly. And we are completely conditioned to view continuous software improvement as this universally good thing.
Usually is.
It usually is. But if you apply that exact same expectation to a digital monetary network, well, you might actually be looking at a system that's designed to fail.
Which is a wild thought to wrap your head around.
It really is. So today on the deep dive, we are unpacking a highly counterintuitive idea. It comes from a really fascinating paper titled The Pretense of Knowledge, Bitcoin's Final Shelling Point.
Yeah, it's a great read.
And our mission today is to explore this argument that, the biggest existential threat to Bitcoin isn't a spectacular crash.
Right.
And it isn't even like a faster or newer piece of technology.
No, it's something much quieter.
Yeah, a slow, quiet abandonment caused by continuous management. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why a network built on continuous improvement might actually be quietly bleeding out, we have to travel back to 1974.
Right, to look at a warning about a completely different subject.
Exactly. So what happened in 1974?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the foundation of this entire argument rests on the work of the economist Friedrich Hayek.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, it's his Nobel Prize acceptance speech. And, Hayek wasn't talking about software or blockchains or digital networks at all.
Right, none of that even existed.
Exactly. He was actually critiquing the hubris of his fellow economists. He called it the pretense of knowledge.
The pretense of knowledge, meaning like faking it?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the dangerous illusion that humans can gather enough data to expertly manage and, perfectly tune highly complex systems.
Like an entire economy.
Right. At the time, centralized planners genuinely believed that if they just put enough brilliant minds in a room, they could pull the right macroeconomic levers.
Adjust the interest rate dials, that sort of thing.
Exactly. They thought they could perfectly engineer a flawless economy.
Which, as history has shown us time and time again, usually ends in complete disaster.
Yeah, because those systems are fundamentally just too complex to model. Humans cannot manage them top down.
Okay, but let me push back on this for a second.
Sure.
Because I want to put myself in the shoes of someone who writes code for a living, right?
Okay, yeah.
In economics, you are dealing with irrational human behavior, which is, impossible to predict.
Very true.
But in tech, we actually do have the data. I mean, the entire open source movement thrives on gathering smart people to iterate and patch and optimize.
Right, that's the whole ethos.
Yeah, so if a system is purely digital, wouldn't continuous data-driven improvement be its greatest strength? I mean, shouldn't we want to fix the bugs?
Well, in almost every other domain of software, that logic holds up perfectly.
Okay.
Like if a social network stagnates, it dies.
Mm-hmm.
People get bored and leave. But money is the ultimate exception to the rule of iteration.
The ultimate exception. How so?
Think about it like this. A messaging app thrives on novelty, but money relies entirely on predictability.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if an operating system update breaks, say a peripheral device, you just roll out a patch the next day. It's an annoyance.
Right. You just wait for the bug fix.
But money doesn't fail when a line of code glitches temporarily.
Okay.
It fails when users fundamentally believe the rules of the system will never stop changing.
Wow, okay.
If the bedrock of your economic reality is constantly shifting, you simply cannot build a stable financial structure on top of it.
And this exact desire for continuous improvement creates like a fatal vulnerability for Bitcoin today, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because the network is drifting. But
Right.
what is so uncomfortable about this realization, I think, is that the drift isn't coming from malicious actors.
No, it's not hackers trying to break the protocol.
Right. It is being driven by the ecosystem's most dedicated builders.
They're trying to save it.
Exactly. Different internal factions all basically share the exact same flawed assumption that Hayek warned about.
They all believe they are the ones who can safely manage the machine.
Yeah, so let's break down those factions, because the source text lays this out really impartially.
We can definitely see this playing out right now across several distinct philosophies within the developer ecosystem.
Okay, like who?
Well, for instance, you have the approach often associated with core,
Right.
and they operate on the belief that human developers can carefully tune the policy of the network.
So mechanically, what does that actually look like?
Mechanically, it means they are constantly analyzing network traffic. They're adjusting things like memory pool limits or, tweaking the algorithms that estimate transaction fees.
So it's an approach built entirely on optimization.
Exactly. Trying to tune the engine to run as smoothly as possible.
Okay, and then on the flip side of that, you have the philosophy often associated with knots. And if Core is trying to tune the engine to run perfectly, Knots is trying to dictate exactly what kind of fuel is allowed in the tank.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah, they believe they can manage the system by aggressively restricting certain behaviors, right?
Yes. Technically, this looks like running nodes that actively filter out non-financial data.
Things like ordinals or those digital inscriptions.
Exactly. Treating them as spam, basically, to keep the blockchain pure.
Okay, so you have Core tuning the policy, Knots policing the data, and then there's a third approach the paper mentions,
Taking it a step further, you also have initiatives like BIP 110.
which is a Bitcoin improvement proposal.
Right, and this represents the endless cycle of temporary fixes. When a new problem arises, a proposal like BIP 110 tends to apply a patch.
Like a Band-Aid.
Pretty much. Mechanically, this might involve tweaking how nodes relay unconfirmed transactions to temporarily stem a flood of spam.
But the critical issue there is that it only treats a symptom.
Exactly. It
Well-
completely ignores the underlying disease.
Right.
Whether a group is tuning block policies or policing data inputs or patching relay rules, the foundational assumption remains completely untouched.
Which is that humans are actively steering the ship.
Yes, humans are in control.
But to make the psychological impact of all this steering real for you listening, I want you to just imagine your own traditional bank for a second.
This is a good mental exercise.
Yeah, imagine if you logged into your account and every 6 months, the bank fundamentally changed the physics of your checking account.
That would be terrifying.
Right. 1 month, they roll out a new algorithm that changes how your transfer limits are calculated. Then the next month, they introduce a new classification for what counts as a valid deposit.
You never know where you stood.
Exactly. Even if the bank promised you, hey, these are vital upgrades, we're optimizing the system, you would feel incredibly anxious.
Because you wouldn't know what the rules of your own money were going to be a year from now.
Exactly. And when you shift that foundation, you destroy the one thing base layer money requires.
Which is trust.
Trust. Exactly. You just move your capital to a place where the rules are boring, static, and completely predictable.
And that anxiety you're describing, that is Hayek's warning playing out in real time.
Wow, yeah.
The active management, the very thing that is intended to protect and optimize the system, is the exact mechanism eroding the confidence of the people relying on it.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if managing money inevitably destroys it, we have to look at what successful unmanaged money actually looks like.
And the paper gives a fantastic example.
It does. It doesn't look to a futuristic piece of technology for the answer. It draws a really heavy, unavoidable contrast to the ultimate historical example.
Gold.
Gold.
Gold is the absolute anchor of this entire economic argument.
Because it just sits there.
Exactly. Think about the physical properties of gold. It has absolutely zero governance structure.
Right.
There is no board of directors voting on its atomic weight.
No CEO of gold.
Right. There is no GitHub repository where developers are proposing Gold 2.0 upgrades to, fix a vulnerability in its density.
It is quite literally just a dense rock we pull out of the dirt.
And it remains completely inert. And that total lack of management is not some primitive flaw waiting to be disrupted by a tech company.
Right. It's not a bug.
It's the feature.
Yeah.
It is the core feature that has allowed it to function as a store of value for millennia.
Because it offers absolute, unquestionable certainty.
Yes. You know exactly how a gold bar will behave tomorrow, and you know exactly how it will behave a century from now.
Which highlights this really profound disconnect in how we evaluate digital money today.
Absolutely.
Bitcoin is currently caught in this cycle of being managed, while gold doesn't need to be managed at all.
Right.
Which means Bitcoin isn't losing to a faster blockchain. It's not losing to a more scalable piece of software. It is losing to certainty.
It is losing to the profound peace of mind that comes from an asset that cannot and will not be altered.
It's a massive paradigm shift, honestly.
It really is. We are entirely conditioned by Silicon Valley to believe that technological superiority always wins.
Right. Move fast and break things.
Exactly. But in the specific realm of base layer money, technological stagnation, if that stagnation guarantees absolute certainty, that is actually the winning strategy.
But And this is a big but. This is where the transition from physical reality to digital code gets incredibly difficult.
Oh, for sure.
Because gold is governed by the laws of physics. Gravity and chemistry aren't open for debate. Humans can't negotiate with a physical element.
You can't argue with a rock.
Exactly. So how on earth do you engineer that same unquestionable physics-level certainty into a digital system? A system that was fundamentally built by humans who, love to tinker and debate and upgrade.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it leads us directly to the concept of a Schelling point.
A Schelling point. Let's bring that down for the listener because a Schelling point is a brilliant concept, but it can sound a bit academic.
It is the absolute key to escaping the cycle of human management.
Okay, so imagine you and a friend are traveling in a massive, crowded city, let's say London.
Okay, London.
You get separated, both of your phones die completely, and you have absolutely no way to communicate.
Nightmare scenario.
Total nightmare. What do? You have to find each other. Chances are you will both independently head straight to the city's most famous landmark.
Like the giant clock tower of Big Ben.
Exactly, Big Ben. You don't go there because you explicitly planned it beforehand.
Right.
You go there because you assume the other person will think of it too. You don't need to negotiate, you don't need to vote, you don't send a message. The answer is just mutually obvious.
Intuitive.
Yeah. That clock tower is a Schelling point.
The clock tower analogy is honestly the perfect way to visualize this.
Yeah.
A Schelling point is basically the default resting state that human beings naturally gravitate toward when communication or formal agreement breaks down.
Right.
Now, map that back to the internal developer factions we just discussed. When a network relies on continuous updates, temporary relay patches, and shifting policies, they're essentially taking that clock tower, dismantling it, and rebuilding it 3 streets over every few months.
Oh, wow. Because if the landmark is constantly moving, it is no longer mutually obvious where you're supposed to go.
Precisely. Temporary rules cannot function as Schelling points.
Because they aren't permanent.
Right. Instead, they foster an environment of endless negotiation. If every single line of code is up for debate, then every proposed update requires massive social consensus.
It is the equivalent of requiring everyone in London to somehow find a way to vote on where to meet today.
Yes. And the brutal reality of open source software is that negotiation never ends.
There's always something new.
Always. There will always be a new scaling problem, a new feature request, a new edge case to patch.
And as long as the system is trapped in that loop of endless negotiation, it completely lacks a resting state. It becomes impossible to rival the absolute certainty of a physical element like gold if you are always arguing about what your digital element is actually supposed to be.
This is the ultimate technical challenge. How do you build a digital clock tower?
Right.
How do you create an inescapable Schelling point in a media made entirely of programmable software?
And the paper actually introduces a highly specific term for this solution. They call it the final JPEG.
Yes, the final JPEG.
Yeah. Now, in a space that is so obsessed with dynamic, programmable money, comparing the ultimate state of a multi-trillion-dollar network to a flat, unchangeable image file seems almost insulting at first glance.
It sounds a bit dismissive, yeah.
Right. Why use that specific metaphor instead of just saying finalized code?
Well, the irony of the term is intentional.
Okay.
It is meant to jar the reader into understanding the concept of finality. Think about the fundamental difference between a JPEG and, say, a live collaborative Google document.
Okay, sure. In a live document, you can adjust the margins, tweak the fonts, endlessly alter the text.
Right. Everyone can jump in and edit. But a JPEG is rendered. It is finished. It is completely flat.
You can't edit the layers anymore.
Exactly. The final JPEG represents the exact moment a digital system permanently stops expanding its meaning.
It is the moment the ink dries on the protocol forever.
Beautifully put, yes.
So how do we actually render the image? Because the paper argues this isn't just some abstract philosophy where we politely ask developers to stop coding.
No, asking nicely never works.
Right. This finality is enforced through a very specific technical mechanism known as a soft fork.
And this mechanism is where the shift from management to finality actually happens.
Okay, break that down for us.
When most people hear the word fork or upgrade in software, they immediately think of expansion.
Adding things.
Right, adding new capabilities, new opcodes, new avenues for data. But a soft fork, structurally, does the exact opposite.
Oh, really?
Yes, a soft fork makes previously valid behaviors invalid. It does not expand what the network can do, it permanently narrows it.
It's essentially the software equivalent of a sculptor.
I like that.
You aren't adding more clay to the model. You are violently chipping away the stone until you hit a final, unchangeable shape.
Yes. Mechanically speaking, when a restrictive soft fork is implemented, older nodes will still recognize the new, tighter blocks being produced.
Because they fit within the old rules.
Exactly. But the newly upgraded nodes will aggressively refuse to accept the loose, permissive behavior of the past.
Okay.
It permanently narrows the corridor of what the network will tolerate.
Wow.
By setting a strict, unmoving boundary, you force the system into a state of finality. You construct the digital clock tower.
But setting boundaries is never a smooth or polite process.
Never.
When you start chipping away the stone, people get hit by the shrapnel.
Yeah, they definitely do.
And this leads us directly into the controversy surrounding a recent network event known as Core v30.
Right, a major point of contention.
For those outside the deep technical weeds, Core v30 was a release that made a massive portion of the community incredibly uncomfortable.
There was a lot of outrage.
Yeah, it generated intense friction. Many onlookers pointed to it as a complete failure, arguing that the system was breaking down.
And this raises a really important question. How do we define a breakdown in a decentralized system?
Okay.
The paper offers a powerful counter-narrative to the panic that surrounded Core v30. It argues that Core v30 didn't break anything.
It didn't.
No. Instead, it revealed that the system was fundamentally unfinished.
Core v30 essentially enforced stricter standardness rules, right?
Yeah.
It started aggressively dropping transactions from node memory pools if they relied on complex or non-standard scripts.
That's right.
So it felt like a break because things that used to just pass right through were suddenly hitting a brick wall.
Exactly that. For years, the network had been operating on unstated assumptions.
Unstated assumption.
Yeah, developers thought they knew where the technical walls of the room were. But those boundaries were never explicitly rendered in the consensus code.
Oh, I see.
So when Core v30 tightened the standardness policies, it bumped hard against those invisible edges.
It caused immediate friction.
Right, because for the first time, the lack of a defined final boundary was exposed to the light of day.
So what does this all mean for the developers who are looking at this fallout? It means we have to reframe our entire understanding of system stress.
We really do.
The paper states quite literally, failure is not betrayal, failure is revelation.
That line is so important. That is the core takeaway of the entire document. Failure is revelation.
The drop transactions, the arguments.
The extreme discomfort surrounding Core v30. None of it was a betrayal of the network's ideals.
Right.
They were a necessary, painful revelation of its current limitations. You simply cannot fix a structural flaw until a stress test forces you to look exactly where the fracture is.
If I can hypothesize for a second.
Go for it.
It almost sounds like an immune system response. Or no, it's like walking around in a dark room for a decade, assuming you know the layout perfectly.
Okay.
And then someone violently flicks the lights on, and you realize the walls aren't where you thought they were, and half the house is actually still missing its drywall.
That is a perfect analogy.
It is jarring and it hurts your eyes,
Right.
but you absolutely have to see the reality of the room if you ever want to finish building it.
Exactly. And that stark reality forces the ultimate choice presented by this text.
Which is?
The crossroads we are sitting at right now is completely unavoidable. Does this digital system want to continue as an endless, unresolvable negotiation?
Does it want to keep acting like a tech company?
Right. Tweaking policies, policing behavior, patching relay rules, and endlessly arguing about what it is actually supposed to be. Or does it take the incredibly painful path of finality? Does it define itself once, permanently, through a restrictive soft fork, and then put down the tools forever?
Wow, it all cycles back to what we established at the beginning.
It really does.
Bitcoin isn't actually competing with fiat currencies,
Right.
and it isn't competing with the traditional banking system.
Yeah.
It is competing with gold.
Yes.
And gold doesn't argue about its own atomic structure.
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't have competing developer factions. Until the endless arguments stop, until the definitive digital clock tower is built and the system is permanently rendered into the final JPEG.
It will continue losing the only thing that actually matters for a base layer money.
Which is belief.
And belief is the entire ballgame.
Right.
If users do not believe the economic foundation is completely stable, if there is even a sliver of fear that human managers will change the rules out from under them, the system slowly bleeds out.
The pretense of knowledge.
Exactly. That intellectual hubris that we can continuously manage complex money, That is the very mechanism that destroys belief.
It is a phenomenal argument, and it completely shatters the way we are taught to look at the intersection of open source technology and economics.
It's definitely a wake-up call.
It is. But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to ponder on your own, something that builds on this idea of absolute finality.
All right, let's hear it.
If the ultimate survival of a digital monetary network relies on completely freezing its rules forever, achieving absolute, unchangeable finality,
Right.
what happens decades from now when the rest of the world's digital infrastructure inevitably evolves around it?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Right. Does creating the perfect digital goal through absolute software rigidity guarantee its survival as the ultimate money? Or does freezing the code eventually guarantee its obsolescence as a piece of technology?
That is a massive tension.
It is, and it does not have an easy answer. But it's exactly the kind of question that makes diving into these complex papers so rewarding.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the systems you interact with every day, and we will catch you next time.